Leading newspaper houses in Nigeria have reported the statement of the Minister of Aviation Festus Keyamo regarding Peter Obi. This is the Sun newspaper, okay, one of the leading newspapers in Nigeria. It says Obi must pay 25,000 naira fine, apologize to airport workers for wrong parking. Says who? Keyamo. What did Keyamo say? Obi must pay 25,000 naira for what? Wrong parking. This is from Sun newspaper. This is Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard newspaper is another leading newspaper in Nigeria. It says Aviation Minister gives Peter Obi 1 week to apologize, pay airport parking fine. This is a video, the footage that has been released, right? This is another leading newspaper house in Nigeria, Sarah Reporters, owned by a Nigerian citizen, but I understand it is hosted in the United States of America. It says Keyamo gives Peter Obi 1 week to apologize, pay fine. Keyamo gives who? Peter Obi. So now, from this report, it's clear the person that the minister has made reference to. He has mentioned this name. He's mentioning Obi's name. For what reason? For parking wrongly at the airport. Let's get some breakdown of the issues of law around the minister's statement. Now, what is obvious from the statement of Festus Keyamo, the Minister for Aviation, and from the publications, is the fact that the Ministry of Aviation in Nigeria has placed a fine for wrong parking at the airport. That's the truth. Ministry of Aviation has placed a fine. If you park wrongly, you pay the fine. Now, if you remember the case between a lawyer in Delta State and Federal Road Safety Commission, the lawyer went to court and said, "My lord, the Federal Road Safety Commission is not a court of law. It should not be given the power to pronounce people guilty for payment of fine. He said you are guilty of this infraction on the road and so on." So the lawyer said, if the road safety has found anybody to have committed an offense, the road safety should take that person before the magistrate's court or any other court of competent jurisdiction, but that the road safety doesn't have the right to impose fine because the road safety is not a court of law. The trial court held in favor of the lawyer and against road safety and said, see, road safety, you are not a court of law, so you cannot impose fine. That matter went to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal held the same thing and said, see, road safety, it's only a court of law that can find somebody guilty and pronounce the payment of fine. Right? So that matter has gone up to the Court of Appeal on this principle, that if you are not a court, you cannot impose fine. Right? Now, you also remember the case of VIO, I think VIO in Abuja or some other state of the federation. Some people went to court and said, VIO doesn't have the power. It's not a court of law, and so it doesn't have the power to impose fine. Why should they impose fine on motorists on the road? And the court also held that VIO as an agency does not have the power to impose fine because it doesn't have the power to find somebody guilty. Imposition of fine is a form of punishment for doing something wrong. So the underlying principle here in these two cases, the Federal Road Safety case and the VIO case, was that only a court of law can pronounce someone guilty of the commission of an offense warranting the payment or the imposition of fine against the person. If that is applied to the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria, which is an agency of the federal government of Nigeria, it would mean that the Federal Airport Authority doesn't have the power under the law to impose fine. Why? Because that agency is not a court of law. And if you are not a court of law to pronounce someone guilty, you cannot have the power to impose fine. You remember that sometimes when people are convicted in courts of law, the judge will say you are hereby ordered to pay fine or go to jail or pay fine alone and go home. Right? So if the judgments in these two cases are to be applied to the Federal Airport Authority, it would mean that the Federal Airport Authority doesn't have the power to impose fine against motorists for wrong parking. What the law rather said was this. What the court rather said was this. If someone has committed an infraction, like in this case, the airport, someone has gone against the rules, what the airport is expected to do is to invite the police to arrest the person and charge the person to the court. The court will now pronounce a fine. And the person will pay because it is only the court that has the power to find you guilty and pronounce payment. Right? But let's even leave all of that and accept the fact that the Federal Airport Authority has the power to impose fine on motorists. Let's even look at it from that angle. Let's even accept it for the purpose of this analysis. In that case, having accepted that they have the power, right, for the purpose of this analysis, the question would be, is the Minister of Aviation, right? This is the Minister of Aviation. Is he right in asking Peter Obi to pay the fine and apologize within 7 days? Is he right? Now, my answer to this is embedded in the legal principle of criminal liability, which is in criminal law. In our justice system, criminal justice system in Nigeria, and even internationally, the position of the law is that criminal liability is personal. It is the man that commits the offense that should be made to pay for the offense. It is not transferable. It's not inherited. Criminal liability is what? It is personal. That is why people are charged to court in their names. John versus State. Sorry, State versus John. Commissioner of Police versus Anthony. Adamu, okay? State versus Adamu. Federal Republic of Nigeria versus Abubakar. Federal Republic of Nigeria versus anybody, right? That is why people are charged in their names. Why? Because criminal liability is personal. You don't transfer the liability to another person that is standing by. You cannot charge Mr. A for the crime or violation of Mr. B. That's the law. If anybody tells you that the law operates differently, ask the person again, because this is the general position of the law, and this is also the position of the law accepted at the realm of international criminal justice. Now, Obi can only be made to pay the fine that the minister is talking about if Obi was the person that drove that car by himself and parked it wrongly. That is the only time that the law would visit Obi and ask him to pay the fine for parking wrongly. If Obi was not the driver, then he has not violated any law, and the minister would be wrong in insisting that Obi must pay a fine of 25,000 naira within 7 days with public apology to members of staff of the airport. The minister is very clear. He has mentioned that it is Obi that must pay that money. The position here is this: if it is not Obi that drove that car, then the minister is wrong in even mentioning Obi's name as the person to pay the fine. For what? For wrong parking. Obi never did any wrong parking. Obi never drove the car. Unless the minister has seen that it was Obi that drove the car and made the wrong parking. In that way, the minister will be justified in asking that Obi must pay the fine for the wrong parking. He will be justified in mentioning Obi's name. But if it is not Obi that drove that car and made the wrong parking, then the minister is wrong in even mentioning Obi's name and mandating him to be the one to pay the 25,000 naira fine and make the public apology for the wrong parking. I think the minister would have been right if he said, we have seen that a vehicle brought Peter Obi to the airport and parked wrongly. I hereby make an order that the person that drove that vehicle should pay 25,000 naira fine and make a public apology within 7 days. Or be very specific, that Peter Obi's driver who drove to the airport and parked wrongly is hereby ordered to pay 25,000 naira and make public apology within 7 days. If that is a statement of the minister would be, right in making the statement. But for him to mention Peter Obi as the person to pay the 25,000 naira when Peter Obi is not the person that drove the car, the minister is absolutely wrong under the law. The minister may have to redirect his statement and direct it clearly to Peter Obi's driver. If Obi, for instance, is taken to the court, a no-case submission will free him. Why? Because criminal liability, like I stated earlier, is personal. It's not transferable. You cannot punish A for the offense of B. I have heard that Obi returned to the vehicle and insisted that it should be freed. I've heard that, so I've read it. Obi returned to the vehicle and insisted that the vehicle should be freed. That is the person that was inside the car. Now, some people have said, if you are not guilty, why did you go back to insist to intervene for the release of the vehicle? Now, it still does not make Obi the driver of the vehicle. And so it does not also make him guilty of any infraction. He went, he solicited for the release. It doesn't make him the driver. It doesn't also make him guilty of the infraction. People have also spoken about vicarious liability. Now, vicarious liability means that the action of the servant can be visited on the master. But vicarious liability applies in tort, civil wrong, not in criminal liability, not in crime. Criminal liability is personal, it's not transferable. The action of the servant cannot be transferred to the master in crime, okay? In criminal law, it can only apply in tort, civil wrong, okay? But not in criminal infraction. Now, so in the scenario of this case, vicarious liability won't even apply to make Obi guilty and liable to pay fine. If investigation shows, however, clearly that it is Peter Obi that drove that car to the airport and parked it wrongly, then Peter will have to pay the 25,000 naira that the minister is talking about and then offer the public apology or face the legal consequences. But on the flip side, if it was not Peter that drove the car, then the minister is completely wrong in even mentioning Peter Obi's name and insisting that he is the person that must pay the 25,000 naira fine within 7 days. Why? Because criminal liability under our criminal law and under international criminal law is personal. It is not transferable. If a son does something wrong, the father cannot be arrested and charged to court for and on behalf of the son, and vice versa. You must place liability properly. And in this case, from the footage, I've not seen where Peter Obi was the one that drove the car, and therefore the minister is expected or would be expected to redirect that command, that order properly to the person that drove the car, but certainly, legally speaking, not to Peter Obi. I'm sure that the days ahead will be quite interesting, and we're here to, follow the news and then make the legal analysis in the news as much as time would permit. Many thanks.